Hi, this is Walter from Yellowstone Country Fly Fishing, and this is a Montana Guide Flies fly tying video for March 28th, I think, 2025. Might be the 29th, I'm actually not sure the date. Whatever the date says on the intro screen is the date it is. Anyhow, I'm doing a Midge Emerger here, really kind of a Midge dry fly. And the name on the tin here is Parachute Midge Emerger, but it really isn't a parachute. It's got a forward-facing white wing here, and then a standard hackle, but then nothing behind it really on the shank besides the body. And so it's going to flip and float, vertically in the water column. So the effect is basically like a parachute, but it's much easier to tie. And I got the basic idea from this pattern from a old fly tying book, Jack Dennis and to Fly Tying with Jack Dennis and Friends. I think that was published in like 1992 or 1993, one of my first fly tying books. And basically the wing and the hackle here should be white and grizzly, or off-white and grizzly as it is here, but then the body can be whatever you want. The original pattern was black dubbing with a Crystal Flash rib or a Midge Flash rib. And I always tied it with a thread body and a flash rib. And I'm just happened to doing an olive one here because I don't have any olive midges in my box right now. And so I'm using micro tubing for this body, but it really does not matter a great deal. You can use whatever you want for the body as long as it's thin and segmented, with maybe with a little sparkle like that, or a little sheen, so to speak. And midges are the most common fly food. And this is about the easiest you can get and tie a single hook midge. And so if you're a little hesitant to tie, not a single hook midge, but a single midge rather than a midge cluster, for midge cluster, that's a Griffiths gnat. But if you're hesitant to tie small flies, hesitant to tie dry midges, this is a good one to start with. All right, so the hook in the vise here is a size 18 short shank dry fly hook. And so in effect, it's a size 20 standard length dry fly hook. And you can tie these as small as you want and as big as you want. If I was tying a 12, for example, I'd use a dubbed body with a rib for sure. And that would be a lake midge, a chironomid. And that would actually be a good stand-in, fulfill a similar role as something like a klinkhammer. So it's a good one that scales. Now my thread here is 8/0 olive dun uni, just thread to match, what you want the fly to look like. And if you're using Vivus or something like that, you're going to want to go with a smaller thread, smaller diameter thread, because 8/0 Vivus is much, much thicker than 8/0 Uni. And then my wing here is going to be white polyarn would be fine. I'm using Polar Bear, Montana Fly Company Widow's Web. It's the same stuff. It's just hot dyed polyarn. You don't want to use Antron for this because it will absorb enough water to sink. And I'm just going to tie the short end of that facing forward over the eye, and then when you wrap it forward, give yourself a little space. Don't go all the way to the eye like I did on the sample fly. And then kind of lift up that tag end, and I'm going to try to trim that at a somewhat of an angle here to create my body taper. And sometimes I do a better job of that than others. I think I did a pretty good job that time. Now the body, like I said on this one, is going to be hairline micro tubing here. In olive brown, and you can use, like I said, whatever you want. I mean, midge body thread, which I've used on some of my patterns. You could even just use thread with a Crystal Flash rib. You could use tinsel. Precise body material doesn't matter. You just want to use something that will create some segmentation. So I tied that in with one turn right there, kind of on the back end of the kind of initial thread base, and then I'm going to stretch that, and I'm going to gradually stretch it. So you see where I'm holding that. I'm just going to keep stretching that as I wrap back here. And that's going to start creating my body taper. I get that basically almost to the bend, and then I'll clean up. And I do kind of want to cover up, or in this case, I'm going to actually do some trimming here. All of those little fuzzies, because I don't want those to show. And one of the benefits of actually using the kind of pale wing material, hopefully you can see here, it's actually, the body is actually a little paler back here than the thread color is, and that'll actually create a bit of a two-tone effect when I wrap the material. All right, so I'm going to kind of stretch that material again, and again I'll sort of relax that stretch as I come forward. Just a little bit. You always want to wrap this material, or really any stretchy material, under tension. And you don't want to wrap that over itself. You know, wrap it in touching turns, or even with a slight gap between those turns, because you really do want that segmentation to show up. And then again, when I cut that, I'm going to stretch it towards myself and then cut, and that helps prevent too big of a tag end. Then my hackle on here is going to just be grizzly saddle, and this one is a Metz, and it's kind of thin. I don't know if you can see that, but there's actually not that many barbs on that hackle. So I'm going to wind up making a bunch of turns. The number of turns you make here, if you have a really, really high quality whiting saddle, for example, you might only need to make 3 turns here. I'm going to make more than that. And then when you're selecting a saddle for this fly, aim upward a little bit. In other words, don't use an undersized hackle. You're better off actually using an oversized one. So this one's more like a size 17, if that makes sense, on this 18 hook. But I'm going to come in here and tie that in, more or less, you know, the curve facing away from myself. And I've left a little bit of bare shank, or I'm sorry, a little bit of bare stem on that hackle. Hopefully you can see that. And that's to establish kind of the angle. If I hadn't left any bare feather stem on that, when I started wrapping it, the first couple turns of hackle would kind of go all over the place, and I don't want that. Alright, so then I'll advance my thread up to the kind of base of the wing there. And you notice I do have a little bit of a gap here. It's because I'm going to tie the fly off in front of that wing. Alright, so I'm going to grab that hackle, and like I said, I need to make a bunch of turns here, and how many you need to make will depend on the quality of your hackle and the size of the fly too. So I think that was about 6 turns that I made. And just a couple turns to tie that off, trim, and then get my whip finisher, and I'm going to do 2 turns on top of that hackle stem, or I'm not the hackle stem, but the tie-off point for the hackle. And I'm going to grab the leftover wing material and pull that back, and I'll do 2 turns, maybe 3 turns actually, in front of that. And I think I need a new spool of thread because my thread just broke. Okay, so now here's an impromptu lesson about what to do here. So I've got thread broken on a small fly. I don't know if you saw that, my thread frayed for some reason right when I was throwing that whip finish. So I've got my turns of thread that I want here in front. I'm actually going to back off a couple turns because I don't want any more turns. So my thread is not attached to anything. I'm going to hook that, which you can't see because this is not a zoom lens, and I don't want to try to refocus here. But I've got my thread clasped in a hackle pliers right now, which I don't actually tend to use hackle pliers for wrapping hackle, but they're good for other things. And so I'm going to get my super glue, and I'm going to tie a glue knot here because my thread broke, and I don't have space to restart my thread without making too much thread build up. So I'm actually going to wipe that super glue onto my thread, and then real quick here, before it dries, I'm just going to make about 3 turns. Basically, I was replacing those turns that I backed off a moment ago, and I'm just going to hold that for a second. Hold that tight. And that should be long enough for that glue to have set. And some folks like doing that, you know, then I clip the excess. Some folks like doing that as their finishing knot, so to speak. I don't. I usually put super glue on top of my knots, particularly on larger flies. But on that one, I kind of had to, because otherwise I was going to have to retie the whole fly. So there you have it. That is a Parachute Midge Emerger, so to speak. And good basic midge pattern, tie it in whatever colors you like to match your local midges. And like I said, it's a good one to fill your box. And as always, thanks for watching. And if you like this video, find it helpful, catch fish on this fly, save a few flies by using that glue connection that I just did. Click the Buy Me a Coffee link in the pattern description and throw me a couple bucks. And if you're looking for guided trips, contact me at flyfishmontana.biz. I will see you next time.